All right, welcome to the program, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here. Michael D. Shaw is my guest.
And hello.
How you doing, Mike? So,
Hey, it's great here.
Zoran Mandani has had a real sweep, apparently, in New York City and in New York, the five boroughs with special elections. Now, I think it's four radical socialists are going to be going to Congress. One of whom, she's I guess she's a six. It's kind of a disgrace on sociology because I'm a sociology student, but she's like, as she's in her sixth year as a PhD sociology student, she's never had a job. She's extremely radical. No police, even if someone's a murderer. Now open borders, which basically sovereignty is an old-fashioned prejudice based on white supremacy. Um, Hates Israel, hates the United Constitution, wants to redo it, wants to revamp it. Just a real privileged background, typical of these people. A lot of them, it seems to me that in New York City anyway, the old Democratic power, which really was promoting blacks and Hispanics to office, has been replaced by by sort of an axis of radical left Islamists like Mandani and radical left women. Privileged background.
Well, here's my question about that. I got more to say, but how do you take your oath of office to serve as a U.S. Congressional representative if it's death to America? How does that work?
Well, it's sort of like when they get up and they say, I remember I had this argument with a guest. Barack Obama would get up after his speech and he would say, "God bless America. God bless you all." And I pointed out that he was praying publicly. That is a prayer. You're asking God, beseeching God to bless America. But of course, my guest was like, "Yeah, but that he didn't mean it. It's just a figure of speech. That's all." And of course, my guest was right. He didn't mean it. But my point being, whether he meant it or not, he was praying. So, in the case of these radicals, yeah, they'll take an oath. I mean, they don't really mean it. It's kind of like when communists used to testify before the McCarthy committee. They would say, "Are you a communist?" "No, I'm not," because they have a clause in their communist membership that says, from the moment you begin to testify, you're not a communist. And when you finish testifying, you automatically go back to being a communist.
That's right. The first rule of Fight Club is to not talk about Fight Club. Right.
That's right. Or like they have I had a college course where they talked about talking about racism. That's all they talked about the whole semester. We're going to talk about racism. They didn't actually get to a real conversation about it and what it actually is and how it impacts. It was all kind of this theoretical gauze, this sort of a veil of meaninglessness that is meant to make people stupid and docile. And I wonder if this is a contagion that is really spreading across the Democratic Party now. I mean, it certainly started with the election of that imbecile AOC in New York. She answered an ad put there by, I think, the ACLU or some radical group. She'd been a bartender at a local place in Queens, came from a privileged background, typical, graduated from BU with a degree in economics, was going nowhere. And she answered the ad and she was elected to Congress, beating an old line Democrat liberal incumbent, which is sort of what happened here.
Well, I mean, in fairness, that's all true, but I believe she won because the guy didn't take her seriously as a primary opponent at all.
That's right. And they're still not taking these people seriously. Okay. Whereas they are out, and to their credit, I mean, Mamdani is no dummy. He's out there during his speech. He said, look, the victory here goes to those who did the canvassing, who knocked on the doors. And he's right. They did that. The Republicans don't think like that. They don't do that. Instead, they rely on the big donors, and they think they're going to buy their way. And same thing with the docile Democrats who are the old left. They don't, like the Schumers and whatnot. So, he's right about that, and they are doing that. And you have these radicals in office, like Karen Bass, like Johnson in Chicago, that are really taking over these big city machines.
Well, one of the other issues is that you mentioned Schumer as an old line sort of Democrat, left winger. At this point, it's not about policy or anything. It's just getting the W, right? They get the W. Nobody's helping any of these people. I mean, the track record of these left wingers is a joke, but the Democrats are going to latch on to get the W. And by the same token, they're going ahead and teaming up with the Islamists without, I guess, realizing that never works. That sooner or later, they're going to be taken over by them, but it's all about the W. And I guess it always has been.
But it is working in the immediate, and it can work. Yeah. Look, it worked for Lenin, right? Nobody took him seriously. It worked for Adolf Hitler, for that matter. Yeah. People, oh, he's just this, little corporal from von Hindenburg was like treated him with contempt. He's like, you're just this little corporal out there in the field. Nobody took him seriously, and yet everyone, it was clear what he stood for. He published his book, Mein Kampf. Nobody bothered to read it. Churchill read it, and he tried to blow the whistle, but nobody listened. Yeah, pay no attention. So, are we in a situation like that now? I think we are. No one's paying attention. They think these people are just some kind of a joke. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party is really kind of twisting itself toward conforming. You get this guy like Plattner in Maine. Here in Boston, we have, Presley, Ayanna Presley. She's about as radical as they come.
Well, what would be the Boston Globe's reaction to Plattner?
They are not going to attack him. They are, but because they need to maintain a shred of credibility. But their attitude is, as horrible as it is, we have to vote for him because we can't help.
Because we need the W.
Because we need to beat the orange man bad, right? It's all about stopping, Trump, and so that's how they are heading into the midterms. And they've got some of the most radical, communistic people imaginable, and they don't care. They may say they care, but they don't. They're going to vote for these people, and it's not a joke. The country.
No, it's not a joke, and I'll tell you where the support is coming from. All right, it's the Gen Xers that feel, with some justification, that they've been screwed. They look at my generation, and you got a house, you got this, you got that. Gen X is not doing well economically. So, as my son, when he got a little smarter, referred to it, he said, when I was younger, I thought, boy, this is cool. Europe understands how to do these things. And then he gets older, he realizes, what the hell is with these Europeans? Guy could be 55 years old. He's living like a college student in a tiny apartment. The highlight of his life is to go to some restaurant. He's making no progress of any kind. And isn't it funny that the biggest impression that the Euros have now coming to the U.S. for the World Cup, my God, they have air conditioning everywhere.
Right, look at this. They got a supermarket. They're walking through Walmart and they're shocked.
Yeah.
It's like, this is America. This is like paradise.
Yeah.
And yet here we are with, I don't know, these real hardcore people. It's sort of, as I said, this kind of unholy alliance between them and the Islamists.
And a lot of it comes from the educational system, which is just horrible. And every day, it's one of these things, maybe I'm looking for it more now, but you literally can't hate academia enough. It's not possible to.
No, it's
Right?
ugly, and I've seen it now firsthand at Arizona State University. Not to single them out, but that happens to be where I'm taking
Yeah.
courses. But I think that's just a template for any of them. It's probably not even as bad as some of the other ones. But it's all critical theory. It's all about race. Everything comes down to that. It's racist, actually. It's
Pretty much.
racial identity politics. It's no different. Bill Maher even named it the other day on his show. This new woman, he says her views could have been held by the Ku Klux Klan. That's right. Everything comes down to race. There's no respect for the American ideal of the individual as someone who's sovereign under God. It's all about your collective race or your collective social class or economic class. And they are, you say, well, they've been screwed. So if they've been screwed, they should be supporting President Trump.
Well, you would think so, but and here's the problem. Bill Maher is very good at looking reasonable on his show, right? But I promise you,
Oh, yeah.
when he enters that voting booth, he's going to still pull the lever for the Democrats.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
no doubt.
I'm sure he is. Although he even said, because the last show he did before, because I watch him pretty regularly, he had on J.D. Vance, and he said to him, "I goes, if the way things are going, and the way the Democrats are voting and the way they're standing, I actually might consider voting for you when I go into the booth."
Okay.
And I think he meant it, and maybe that could happen. But meanwhile, this unholy alliance is it's more openly and more unabashedly slipping further to the left. And I just wonder if that could be a wake-up call for enough Americans to stand up and start to take back the country. I mean, I think they've done it before. They did it by re-electing President Trump, which is a miracle.
Well, here's the point, though, Chuck. How bad does it have to get? I mean, we have now in LA, we have a situation where it's Karen Bass versus what's her name, the Indian councilwoman, and there are people that are afraid that this councilwoman's going to win. And
now, is that absolutely over now for Spencer Pratt? Because
yeah,
I was in California just like a week ago, and I noticed that they're still getting batches of votes. The election is still not over, apparently. They're still counting votes.
well, in California, the election's never over, but the trouble is that you have a generation that's been radicalized. So, and again, I keep talking about it's all about the devil. It doesn't matter. The fact that you had the worst fire in the history of LA, and this woman even has the temerity to run for re-election. So whether it's Bass or, and I'm just blanking on her name,
Right, I know.
it doesn't matter.
So then she's going to be. It's kind of this. We've talked about this sort of authoritarian tendency that people just want to accept some kind of status quo, and once you get in power, some of these people, especially, and I'm not on TikTok right now, so I could say this.
Raman, R-A-M-A-N. Yeah,
these radical left-wing white lesbians who, once they're in power, you never get rid of them. They're there for life. It's like what Ted Kennedy used to be. He was there. That was a lifetime tenure. As bad as he was, and he was a scoundrel. Didn't matter.
Okay, let's talk about that. What was the staying power of Ted Kennedy? No matter what he did, it didn't matter.
It didn't matter. He could leave a woman to drown under the river. He just had, not only did he have the media in his pocket, particularly the Boston Globe, but, and I can't even talk about this because I know some things about it that I can't discuss, but he had certain people in the judiciary and certain people in the establishment and in Boston that were willing to make things happen to help him and to clear out things that could hurt him. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
And he had, the very corrupt, really rotten political machine here just was able to ensure that he was there and stayed there. Um, I don't know if he actually did get the actual votes. He had some pretty good challenges, but he just was not to be touched in this state. Decisions were made, and that was that. I mean, that seems to be how it works. I think Ayanna Pressley now is like that. Even if the Boston Globe doesn't particularly love her, they're still going to protect her. She's in for life. She'll probably end up going to the Senate once Pocahontas Warren, another one, who is going to be there for life. These people, they keep saying, oh, they're so brilliant. She's so brilliant. Yeah, sure. She's the one who her idiotic policies led to the bankruptcy of Spirit Airlines. But she's so brilliant. Why? I mean, they did this to Dukakis. So brilliant. Nobody knew why, but he was built up to such a degree.
Well, why is it though? I mean, you mentioned that. Why did people just accept this without question?
I think that you get enough followers, but the point is that they have such a hold on the mainstream powers. I mean, they've infiltrated all of the biggest establishments in our state and probably in the country. The media, the big corporations, the academia, certainly, the institutions of culture. It's just they have become so pervasive and so, amorphous that people don't dare defy it. They just sort of accept it because they want to have an easy time. Nobody wants to be ridiculed. Then, of course, if you step up, I could speak to this as someone who ran for office in this state. If you step up and challenge that, oh my God, it's shocking. I remember I had some guy say to me, and more than one, I'm like, well, I'm out there gathering signatures. Don't you want to see like any opposition to Barney Frank? You don't have to vote for me, but don't you want to see like two parties? Don't you want to see like a contest? Maybe some debating, maybe some issues brought up? No, I don't. I just want Frank to win. I don't want any opposition. It's like we just want this to happen. We don't care. And we don't want him to be questioned. And that's an attitude that I think maybe becomes entrenched in like a one-party state, I guess, which is what Massachusetts is. Right now I'm writing a book about the origins of nationalism and what it is. And I look at ancient nationalism, which was around idol worship. Why did the Bible constantly warn us about idol worship? The children of Israel were tempted by idol worship all the way from the days of Abraham right up to Roman times, because it was very alluring to have this incredible power to tell you what to do, and that the idol, being false, was nothing more than a substitute for the power of the state. And the people that ran the idol knew this. They knew it was false because they created it. But it was used as a substitute, as a proxy for state power. And it used a combination of terror and fear by murdering people through sacrifice, throwing babies into the belly of a burning idol or throwing a virgin over the cliff, whatever they did. And also this other forms of mumbo jumbo, sexual immorality, all kinds of stuff they did, all to keep people, docile, to prevent the development of the individual and of the family, to stop people from becoming aware of their own agency under God. I don't know, I'm getting off on a tangent here, but I'm just saying that in the modern times, the idol has been replaced by this worship of some unspoken power. Ultimately, when you scratch the deep surface, we're talking Satan, in my opinion. And the Bible gets into that in the Garden of Eden. But we're looking at just this amorphous power that people don't want to challenge because they want to have a quiet and happy, secular life. As you say, they could go to a restaurant. They can, have a nice time going to the beach. They don't want to think about how ugly this is. And the powers, they understand that. They understand that There's ways and methods by psychology, by fear, to make people docile, to make people stupid. And I think that's what they do.
So how do you ever counter this? I mean, ultimately, the real problem was universal suffrage. Never going to get rid of that.
Right.
So I guess, so you have to explain now how Trump got elected twice.
Well, I mean, he got elected 3 times, in my opinion. But it's because people, I think that they have responded. You know, it shows that, in spite of everything, I would say sacredness of this one man, one vote, and the secretness of the ballot box is still an incredible power. That's why the founding fathers put that system in place. You know, I mean, and that ultimately, you know, when you go to vote, nobody knows who you voted for. Of course, they're trying to tinker with that, as we know. I don't know what the Supreme Court is thinking, and Amy Coney thinking, when she now says that states don't have to count all their ballots after voting day. They can continue counting afterwards. I mean, I don't get that. But even with that in place, there's enough people now in this country who understand and who don't trust that system. And President Trump is taking steps. I think that he should declare an emergency. And, you know, there needs to be some drastic steps taken to making sure that the elections aren't stolen.
Well, I would agree. I mean, Amy Barrett has been a disappointment from the get-go,
right?
In my opinion. And who the hell recommended her to Trump? That's what I'd like to know.
I think that it was one of these things where the clock was ticking. It was like literally just a week or so before Election Day when Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away.
Right.
And he only had a window to get that done. And so they figured, okay, we have to put in a woman. And they kind of punted. I mean, it's just unfortunate because she's a phony. You know, she's like some of these rhino Republican senators. They're just the worst. They're worse than the liberal Democrats. They weren't really, they ran on as Republicans because they knew that that's the only way they could get elected in those states.
Well, of course, the other problem is, and I keep going back to this academia thing, that why is it that so much power is invested in these people that never actually practice law in the practical sense?
Well, I mean, why do we even need lawyers? I mean, in office, I don't,
Well, okay, no, but what I'm saying is, you can make the analogy to Fauci types that hold great power in medicine, and they've never seen a patient in their life. So make that make sense.
It goes to this, what the Germans and what the Nazis call the Führerprinzip. It's this worship of the leader as the new idol. Hitler demanded that people who joined the Wehrmacht take a personal loyalty oath to him, not to the state, even not to Germany, but to him personally. It's a use of fear to enhance that. In this country, what do they do to make people fearful? Well, for one thing, the setting up, frankly, of the IRS is a very fearful thing. Why do we need that? It'll never go away. Didn't used to be there. It was briefly put in place after the Civil War because the government needed to have it. President Ulysses S. Grant rescinded it, got rid of it. The war is over. We don't need this. Eventually, it came back because of an amendment that was passed in very questionable ways. And now they have the ability to poke their nose into the personal finance of every single earner in this country. It's an incredible power, and it's a fearful power. And now, of course, under Obama, it became one that included an informal army. They hired all these people with tanks and weapons, right?
Yeah.
And Biden tried to expand, or whoever was running that administration, they hired 80,000 new agents. It is a fearful power. I don't mean to just single them out. I'm only using them as an example of the new idol worship in this country that is done with a combination of fear and terror and just docility and the willingness to accept a predominant view because it's the path of least resistance. People don't have the courage. They don't have the self-awareness. They don't have the knowledge. They just, they've sold out at an early age because they needed to have a career. And I'm not necessarily blaming everyone. You invest years of your life to becoming a person in getting a big job or whatever it is, and they hold it over you. You have to kind of play ball, or you're going to be sent down to getting screwed the rest of your life. So you do. You play ball, and at the very top levels of power, there has always been an element of blackmail, I think. I think of, for example, Woodrow Wilson. He was installed by this cabal, I think, and he was being blackmailed because he had an extramarital affair with a woman. And back then, of course, today that might not even be that big a deal. But back then, that was a scandal that would destroy someone's career. And so he played ball with the establishment. He did, he got us into World War I. He passed the Federal Reserve Act. He signed the Income Tax Amendment. He did all these things. Suffrage, you talk about suffrage. That happened under him. The Prohibition.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Wilson because I don't know what all those policies were, but I know for a fact that he was against women's suffrage and somehow got talked into it at the last minute.
Yeah, I mean, look, he personally, at the end of his life, according to, I've seen these quotes republished many times. There's no absolute proof that he said it. They can't be sourced. But I think that it sounds like him, and they certainly have had an impact, where he said, look, my presidency was the biggest disaster to happen in this country in 200 years. I was blackmailed. I am sorry that I did all these things. And he lists off particularly the Federal Reserve Act, which was basically turning over American currency to this cabal of private bankers and investors. And it took it, which is not what the Constitution calls for. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 says that Congress shall mint coin and determine the value thereof. The determining the value is the question here. The coin is only symbolic. It's not necessarily literally a coin, although they can do that and do. But it's that they determine the value of the currency, not some Federal Reserve, which is not accountable to the American people. The people decide the value of their currency through their elected representatives in a Congress. That is according to the Constitution. Wilson sold that out. And since then, the dollar has been devalued. And we no longer have control, in a sense, over the true value of our property.
Well, has anyone identified this cabal specifically?
People who have over the centuries, it has not ended well for them. They went down in the Titanic, or you had that, right? There was that great congressman, his name escapes me. I'm having maybe a senior moment, in the 1930s who got up and identified the nature of this power. And he died under mysterious circumstances. You had Charles Lindbergh's father was a congressman who wrote a book about this, and he stood up, and he was basically pushed out. You have other people who have stood up. JFK, he was suddenly discovered that the Fort Knox could create silver dollars. Dollars based on silver coin and silver bullion without the Federal Reserve. And he started to do that just around the time that he lost his life. According to James Marr, who was this great author, I interviewed him a couple of times before he passed away. Bill, I think it was James Marr, yeah. And he wrote a couple of books about this. By the way, they were published by Simon & Schuster. This wasn't even some right-wing conspiracy book either. Anyway, there are a lot of people who have taken this on, and things didn't go right. Let's just put it that way. This is an enormous power. They don't like opposition. They control the value of our money, and as such, they control the value of our property and our value.
Even people who describe the conspiracy, that probably the famous one was Dorothy Kilgallen. She starts talking about the Kennedy assassination, and Shazam, she's gone.
She was about to release, and she actually contacted a friend. There's an author about that. I should have him on. He's done some deep dive into this. She was about to release her findings, had the papers, had all of her. She's a journalist. You know, she actually believed that journalism should be real. And just before the release, she's found dead in her bed. I mean, very mysterious circumstances.
Yeah.
They claim that she committed suicide, not likely, but the papers were gone. All of her documents were gone, and that we'll never find out. Look, there's stuff about that we'll never find out. You know, there were people, you know, we talk about the Clinton death list. I mean, the Kennedy death list after the fact is a long one. I admire the courage of RFK Jr. trying to find out, but, you know, Trump, I think, is trying to publish everything, but he can't. There's just stuff that's been destroyed. We'll never get to the bottom of it. But the point is that we all, I think most Americans, maybe with some exceptions like that, who's that author who wrote about the lone gunman? But most Americans know that there's something about that stinks. That it's, in a way, it's sort of a reprise of the idol worship concept, which is that somebody would be killed ritually, and there's a lot of ritual around that assassination, and that this is a warning to everyone else that this could be you. Because if we can do this to the most powerful man in America in broad daylight, then we can do it to you. And so that's how the idol regime worked, right? They throw a young virgin in the volcano once a year in a very big public spectacle. Everybody would see it happen.
And how much more effective is it if they throw somebody important into the volcano?
Well, that's right. And that's what it's just, it really, it's like if they can do this to him, then, you know, it sends a message that's maybe subconscious or maybe open, that you had better keep your nose clean. I feel nervous talking about this in a way. I mean, it's, you know, it's serious stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that that's how power works, always has. You know, it's a combination of fear and terror and hocus pocus, you know, mumbo jumbo, you know, what the Romans called bread and circus, you know, keep everybody entertained, you know, keep the, you know, people going to games and just having pastimes.
Well, it's funny you say that because they don't even know how to do that right anymore with all these movies failing. And
now I understand Hollywood is actually having, according to the Drudge Report, which is not on our side.
That's not what the Drudge Report isn't the old Drudge Report.
No, it's certainly, since Drudge, I think, retired, I think his father took over. And he fired all of the Drudge people. And he's a leftist.
Yeah.
And they say that Hollywood is having its most successful year in many, many decades. Is that true?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all.
I didn't think so.
In fact, the latest flop is Supergirl. And they're reasonably sure that the Odyssey will be a flop.
Yeah, you wrote about that one. I mean,
yeah, well, they try to blame it on toxic fans, but the Supergirl story is very interesting. That they okay, you're going to make a movie with a $200 million budget, so to write the script, you pick a failed actress that has no screenwriting credits. All right, that sounds good. Your lead actress, to be charitable, is unattractive.
So then what do
And
they
it just
expect?
goes downhill from there. You know?
Movies are a visual medium. I mean, if you have to have somebody who has some appeal on a
No,
movie.
I mean, the color gradations are bad. The lighting is bad. Everything is bad. The music is bad. And now they're blaming the, quote, toxic fans.
So they blame it on the public for not liking this, right?
Which is really a novel sort of approach, right?
Did they know how bad it was when they did this? Is this a deliberate thing, or was it just incompetence?
Well, it depends how you define incompetence. I mean, if entertainment is supposed to, entertain the masses, but instead it's entertaining the creators, then I think you're sort of pursuing the wrong goal here.
So maybe they're just in such a bubble that, I mean,
absolutely.
They showed that with the release of those Zoom conversations amongst Disney executives. Remember that?
Yeah.
They're talking about, oh, we're going to promote this trans actor, and we're going to promote this one is too toxic, and that one. And it was so like in a bubble. It was so out of touch with what average people think about or want or talk about, that it was almost like they're in their own universe, and they just had no conception. Now, they didn't have that conversation publicly, so at least they might have understood well enough that it wouldn't fly. But even so, the whole tone of it, if you listen to the way they talked about this, I've heard this kind of talk, they just have no idea that this stuff isn't resonating with anyone other than them.
Well, I guess they don't care because they're going to change the public perception. And
yeah, but what about
this Larry Fink deal that we're going to force you to change your point of view, but it doesn't work.
No, it's social engineering, and it's trying to ask people to accept something that's not natural and that they're not interested in accepting, and the only way they can accept it is through coercion. Even the whole, not to get into a subject, but the whole trans thing is really one of the brainchildren of what's his face's brother or sister, whatever you want to call him, that being the governor of Illinois with Pritzker.
Yeah.
One of the richest families in America. The brother is trying to be a she, worth who knows how many tens of billions of dollars, and uses the money to pay to make sure that people advocate for this. And with, and has a, beyond that, it's kind of like Fauci used money. He kind of had like a broader reach in that he could influence other people who had money and intimidate people who didn't play ball with this agenda. And their sister is on the board of directors of Harvard, and she's the one that was responsible for hiring gay.
Yeah.
For her. I mean, these people and they're super rich, they're radicalized, and they use money to push their agenda, and they're not the only ones. Look at this guy Singham from China. He's behind Antifa. He's behind, probably didn't he finance? One of them financed the Eugene Carroll. They basically buy up these agendas to push their will, and they use considerable wealth to do it. One of the people that really took this on was the late David Horowitz, and I interviewed him many times. In fact, one of his proteges, I think I'm going to be having him on my show soon to talk about his legacy. He's a great writer, it really influenced me. Not the nicest guy in the world, as a person, frankly. Right. But I had him on regularly, and he was a great thinker, former leftist, who exposed in many books, one of his books, how the foundations and the big nonprofits have combined their efforts and have grown economically in terms of expanding their influence. And that's what this is. They use the money power that they've combined to get these agendas across the plate. They don't care if people like it or not. And they suppress opposition in a most brutal way.
Well, I think that because I met David a couple of times, and I got the impression he was really trying to atone for his sins
Yeah.
of his past life. And his wake-up call, as I'm sure you must have mentioned when you interviewed him, was the murder of Betty Van Patter, the secretary.
Yeah, by the Black Panthers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess suddenly he realized, gee, these really aren't good guys. Now, I never had the courage to ask him, well, why didn't you realize that before? But at least he woke up.
He did, and a couple of people around him did too, who were former leftists.
Peter Collier.
Peter Collier, the few others. But, I wonder, I would have liked to have asked him why he thinks so many of them remain like kind of embedded in this thing. And these are not stupid people. And yet they go down with the ship. I mean, they continue to promote something that they know in the core is wrong and is evil and is false.
Well, some are true believers. I mean, look at the difference between David Greenglass and Ethel Rosenberg. And it came to the end of the day, Greenglass at least saved his family.
Yeah.
And Ethel Rosenberg did. Right?
Yeah, that's why he did it. He goes, look, I had to say something because I was told that, my family and I would be sent up the river. So, I mean, they all could have saved themselves, or at least she could have saved herself. But she went down with the ship. They were true. Yeah, they were
really true believers.
They were. Whittaker Chambers talks about that. Another one who switched from communism.
Yeah.
He said there's nothing more, in a way, it describes the mullahs in Iran. People who embrace a very narrow narrative like that this is the truth and that's that, and that it's not a truth that comes from divine or inspired values. It's a truth that's earthly. We're going to make something happen on earth because we're the elect. We have divine. That's why I say that at the core of that movement, and it's one that goes in every generation, is the serpent of Eden, Satan. What Christians view as literally Satan, what Jews view, and very practically the same thing, as an evil influence, but it's the same. That this idea that the serpent said to Eve, and then Adam, who was standing right next to her, you can be like God. You can know all things. You can know good and evil. You can know the mysteries of the universe. All you have to do is take a bite of the apple, which God told you not to do, and thus defy the order of the universe as God established. And they went and took a bite of the apple. And ever since then, symbolically, whether you believe these things literally, like I do, or not, you could look at it metaphorically, fine. It's basically a reiteration in every generation of people, cliques of people, who embrace this idea that they have some kind of a divine right to define existence, to define morality, that they have replaced God. When you murder someone, you have replaced God because you've decided whether someone lives or dies. That is a decision that only God makes. And thus you get the death penalty. It's the ultimate. That's why they say it's a capital crime. Any of these sorts of crimes, I would contend that, sex change operations are an attempt to reorder the universe because God gave you, when you were born, he made you male or female. You're degrading, it's not as serious as murder, but you're trying to reorder the universe. And when you advocate for that, you are acting like the serpent. You are advocating that man takes over what is good and evil. Man decides the nature of reality itself. There are no divine immutable truths. which is what Jefferson talked about in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, right? That and besides that, all men are created equal. It was also we're endowed by the Creator, God, with inalienable rights, not rights that can be switched around or tampered with. They're outside of the hand of man. They're inalienable. And yet, every generation has seen the followers of the serpent trying to open the portals of hell and say, we can decide what's true.
And isn't it interesting that nobody ever learns? I mean, that's the human condition right there. When John Money, who was the big proponent of this transgender nonsense, his entire career was a failure. There was the whole celebrated case where there was, and you probably know this, the circumcision got bad. Well, fine, we'll raise this kid as a girl. Well, it didn't work. It didn't work.
Not only didn't it work, but he actually wanted to do surgery on the child. And the parents who went along with him up until that point, they didn't even allow that. And then when that child got older, he went after John Money with a gun. He looked for him. He almost shot him. So, yeah, but he was the father of...
Right, but I mean, that's my point. This guy was an abject failure.
Yeah.
But yet, he created this movement. Now, again, I hate to harp on this, and that abject failure worked for Johns Hopkins University.
And I'm sure that Rockefeller funds had a lot to do with it too, but I don't know.
I wouldn't doubt it.
I mean, they were all over Planned Parenthood and the Negro Project. They certainly were all over modern medicine, the Flexner Report, and they were all over education. Talk about, followers of the serpent. They want to reorder human nature.
That should be the title of your next book.
Followers
of the serpent.
I like that.
Yeah, that is good. Yeah. Go ahead and use that. Boy, that would be... Oh.
Well, I used your suggestion for my last book, so why not?
Yeah, Followers of the Serpent.
Followers of the Serpent.
They could even make a movie of it. I mean, this could be it.
I don't think they'll ever make a movie out of that. The movies will be made with these ugly actresses like the one that they just did. And they don't seem to care about whether or not they make a buck. I don't know, but I mean, at some point they have to care. I mean, you'd think.
Well, the only thing that's keeping Disney going is the theme parks, and that's starting to play out because it's just gotten too expensive.
I know. I mean,
it's certainly very, very possible for family to spend $2,000 a day.
Yeah, it's crazy. I know that when my daughter was that age, like a lot of people, we went to Disneyland, and the second time we went, the first time was okay, but the second time it was really unpleasant in that they had no, I don't know, maybe they can't help this, but there was no crowd control. And it was so crowded that we had to take a bus. We had to, get to a location, and then they basically shoved us in like with these sticks to get them into, and then you get in there and the lines, and it was just, it was not a pleasant afternoon at all.
Well, right, and now to make it worse is that you could pay, I don't know what the latest price is, $400 a day for a premium pass.
Right.
That maybe, slightly cuts the length of time that you're in line. So it's...
Yeah. And the whole place is starting to look a little threadbare. Let's just put it that way. I mean, they're not exactly putting anything into keeping it up. So I don't know how long that's going to go. I mean, unfortunately, I used to like amusement parks, but they seem to have gone by the wayside. I mean, people don't go out and do stuff like that.
Well, I mean, I think they lost the muse on it, because when I was a teenager, the big thing around this area was POP, Pacific Ocean Park, which had kind of a slightly sleazy, carny type aspect to it, which I think is part of the whole experience.
Oh, yeah.
And they ended up closing it down. But because they were trying to do more real estate development
Right.
In Ocean Park area. But it was, I don't know if you could ever do anything like that again. It just had this, there was a funhouse mirror thing.
Oh yeah, they had the same thing here. I mean, Paragon Park and also on Nantasket Beach. It was an old-fashioned amusement park. It had a little bit of a tawdry edge to it.
Yeah, you got to have that.
You got to have it. You could get the roller coaster. You could go on and stay on it, and it was great. And all these weird kind of like the horror house and
yeah.
It all was eaten up by real estate people. Now it's one ugly condo. There's nothing left. The only thing they did keep the carousel, but that's it. And I don't know, maybe that kind of entertainment has gone by the wayside. We used to have a great time. My father would take myself and my two younger brothers, and we were just excited to be there. It was incredible.
I remember going to Nantasket. I forgot the name of the park.
Paragon.
But I was at Paragon, and I was on the roller coaster, and it did have that old sort of carny type.
It did. It was just a lot of characters, and we kind of were there at the end of it too, so it was really starting to go downhill. But I just don't think that Americans go for that anymore. They don't go out anymore. It's all sort of, I guess maybe it's the age of the cell phone. Now you have in your pocket the equivalent of a massive computer. So people just stay home and they look at little videos. I'm doing it. We all do it. I mean, right? My wife and I are there. Our idea of ending the evening is we each have our own little cell phone. We have our headphones on, and we're looking at our own little videos.
And everybody has succumbed because my wife was biggest tech phobe in the world.
Yeah.
And now, she's watching the videos on her phone and doing the whole
these silly little comedic things. I mean, and you just go to one after the other, and it's like it's kind of like, I mean, I remember talking about this and having a guest talk about this when MTV first came out, that it's going to destroy the attention span of people, and especially young people, because you get these little, first of all, if you have a work of music which creates imagination, you take it and you make it into a visual, and then you cut it into this short, quick visual with all this action and this dynamics going on and images flashing, boom, 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 across the brain. It's going to have an effect on people's attention span and on their ability to think in full intellectual thought. And I think it does. I mean, some younger people, I think of my own daughter, I mean, she's very against this. She rarely watches any of that because she wants to make sure she's reading things. I mean, she's got an intellectual bent. But most young people don't have that kind of discipline, and most older people don't either now. They just sort of, we've become like a nation of couch potatoes. You don't go out to Paragon Park anymore because you can just watch someone else do it on some goofy, video and sit there on your backside and I mean, whatever. Anyway, it's a societal situation. We don't know the long-term effects. I get the sense that they're not good.
Probably not.
So anyway, now that we've talked about the radical takeover in New York City and the potential of that in other cities, my only hope is that it might do what I think it was right after the attack on Pearl Harbor that the Japanese General Yamamoto was asked by a reporter, "What do you think is going to happen now?" And his answer was, "I think we have awoken the giant. I don't know the exact
sleeping
word.
giant.
Yeah, the sleeping giant. Well, we are still that, I hope. And maybe the election of these crackpots and these radicals and their alliance with our enemies might have that effect. I do feel some rumblings in that regard.
I think you're right, but isn't it depressing that you have to go through it before you realize
gee, maybe this is not a good idea.
Well, we
It's-
talked about this also in that, you asked, like, are people ever going to realize that? And I think that my answer is no, they're not. I mean, we're going to have this in every generation.
Yeah.
From Adam and Eve up until the days of the coming of the Moshiach, we're going to have, and that's something that's a divine thing. It's out of our control. But as long as we have human beings who are infallible, who are fallible, I should say, we're imperfect, we're not God, we're going to have a darker side of our lives. There's going to be these darker temptations. And when they come together in collusion and they form what's called a conspiracy, then they get stronger. It becomes like a pack of wolves. The individual wolf is not as powerful as when they join a pack. And that's something that's not going to go away. And that every generation has challenges, and every generation has to stand up to it. And every generation has to have enough people who understand their agency under God and have the courage to stand up to it, wake up enough people to at least put it on its heels. It'll never be stopped because power is corrupting. So anyway, Mike, what do you have coming up on the Substack?
Well, I had somebody come out, I think over the weekend. I did sort of a long form retrospective on that Netflix miniseries, Midnight Mass, which I tore into in some detail.
Okay.
Got some commentary on it, but it was one of these things that you could have written a 5,000 word piece on. No one would have read it, but
Right.
there were so many things wrong. So
I'm not familiar with it. Should I watch it? Check it out.
It's, as Roger Ebert used to say, it was a long ride for a short day at the beach.
Okay.
Well, I mean, the problem is it was based on a sort of an anti-Catholic screed.
Right.
A lapsed Catholic, actually, is director and a writer, but he didn't have the courage of his convictions. Right? If you're going to write a dark story, then make it a dark story. But it was very dark, but it ended up somehow all the bad influences were killed in a very unlikely manner. Very unlikely. When the better story would have been for the vampires who won. I mean, that would have been a dark story.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a disappointment, even from his own point of view.
Right.
But yeah, I had to sit through 7 episodes, and it was kind of painful.
Well, you did it. So
I mentioned last week that he did the Bill Clinton trick of deliberate malapropisms, daring you to call him out.
I see. So he did it in public, and then he covered his tracks at the end.
Yeah.
Well, you watched it, so we wouldn't have to.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Exactly. I felt like you.
Okay. All right, Mike. So my programming will be changing next week. I'm going to be live Monday through Friday, most days, not all, but at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. So I'll talk to you next week at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time.
All right. Sounds good. We'll see you then.
All right, Mike. Take care.